I've been using this word real estate for many years now, but it's only now that I'm wondering where this word actually comes from. So, real estate is two words, real and estate. The word real, as per its Latin origin, means something that is true or is actually in existence. And the term estate means a condition or a status. So, real means true and estate means status. So, when we put together these two words, we have the phrase true status. And while it's true that my little impersonation of Robert Langdon has failed miserably, we can't shy away from the fact that land and property has, for many centuries, been symbolic of a person's true financial status. From an investment perspective, there are largely two options available to us. One, we can invest in actual land and actual building, which is both unaffordable and a big hassle for most people. And option two is where we can invest in stocks of listed real estate companies, which come with its own market related risks. But now there is a third option, which is to invest via real estate investment trusts. So in this video, we shall look closely at the workings of this financial product as we understand how real estate investment trusts work, how have they performed as an asset class, their taxation structure, and of course, should you invest in them? Simply said, a real estate investment trust or REIT is an entity, a trust that owns, operates, or finances income generating real estate. As a construct, REITs work a lot like mutual funds, wherein multiple investors can pool in their money, which is then given to a professionally managed REIT fund. This fund, much like a mutual fund purchases stocks, then goes about buying commercial properties like offices, hotels, hospitals, malls, etc. The rent earned from these properties or the profits made on buying and selling constitute the income for the REIT investors, which is then transferred to them in the form of dividends. And that's pretty much how a REIT works. Now, this particular type of operation is labeled as an equity REIT partly because it works a lot like an equity fund with dividends and capital appreciation. But there is another type of REIT called the mortgage REIT, whose primary operation is not to buy and manage properties but to loan out money or finance other investors who then invest in real estate. Of course, in this case, the mortgage REIT does not receive any rent, but instead it receives interest for the money loaned out, which is then distributed to the investors. The difference between dividends, interest, and capital appreciation is a bit important, and we'll elaborate on that later in the video. Now, globally, there are many different kinds of REITs. There are retail REITs, which specialize in malls, shops, and retail establishments. There are residential REITs, office REITs, and even healthcare REITs that are specific to hospitals, retirement homes, and healthcare centers. In numbers, the global REIT market is about $2 trillion in size, with the Asian REITs cornering 14% of that market with a value of $280 billion as of last year. The concept of REITs is relatively new in India, and the first guidelines were introduced by SEBI, that is the Securities and Exchange Board of India, in the year 2007, which then got approved as regulations in 2014. Do recall we had done a video on infrastructure investment trusts on the ET Money YouTube channel, and there's a lot in common between InvITs and REITs, especially when it comes to the concept and the construct. So if you've already watched our video on InvITs, then you'll certainly find it easier to understand this section of the video. Now, the SEBI regulations and the subsequent amendments were the first positive steps taken by the regulator and the Indian government towards making REITs an attractive investment option. And since then, a lot of headway has been made, especially when it comes to looking after the investor's interest. For instance, to improve transparency, the regulations require that all REITs in India should be set up only as a trust and not as a company or LLP, and that these REITs should be tradable on the Indian stock exchanges. Additionally, REITs are required to invest at least 80% of the funds in rent generating commercial properties, and only the balance 20% can be utilized for more risky endeavors like buying stocks in real estate companies, giving loans, or investing in under construction property. Another important point in the regulations is the mandatory distribution of 90% of the net distributable cash earnings, which gives investors a higher earnings predictability, and something that we'll discuss in more details in the next section. Also, from a taxation angle, REITs are offered some key tax exemptions on rental income, leasing, interest and dividends, which are generally not available to other type of real estate companies. These tax benefits help reduce the REIT's tax liability and generate higher income for the investors. So net, while it's still in its infancy in India, there is a lot being done to nurture greater interest in REITs as an investment opportunity, not just from individual and institutional investors, but also towards attracting more foreign investment in this asset class. From an investor's point of view, REITs offer two classes of returns. The first one is the distributable returns, which are in the form of dividends, interest and return of capital. And the second way of receiving returns from REITs is via the capital appreciation route, which is the rise or fall in the value of its NAV in the stock markets. Now, the good part is that unlike companies, REITs cannot sit on the cash flows that they earn. They are required to distribute not less than 90% of the cash flows they receive, after being allowed to deduct some expenses like management fees, depreciation, maintenance, etc. Now, it's important to understand how REITs distribute returns to the unit holders, and we shall study this by examining the distribution history of Embassy Office Parks REIT, which is also India's first publicly listed real estate investment trust. The table here shows that there are three parts to how returns are being distributed by Embassy Office Parks. There are interest payments, there are dividend payments, and there is something called the amortization of SPV level debt. Now, this term amortization of SPV level debt may sound a bit technical, but all it means is that the SPV or special purpose vehicle, which is like a subsidiary of the REIT, is simply repaying the loan that it had originally taken from the REIT. So if you look at the most recent quarter, that is quarter 4 of FY21, the Embassy Office Parks REIT has distributed 5.6 rupees per unit with a breakup of 1.24 as interest, 2.21 rupees as dividend and 2.15 as amortization. This division of dividend, interest and amortization is quite important from a taxation standpoint. But on an overall basis, this history of returns can be very useful for investors in estimating the distribution yield of a REIT. And here's how you can go about it. First, you estimate the annual distribution, which when added to the last 4 quarters of Embassy Office Parks comes to about 22 rupees. Then you check the current market price, which at the time of recording this video was 324 rupees for this particular REIT. 22 divided by 324 is your gross distribution yield, which comes to 6.8%. Of course, this number keeps changing every day basis the prevailing price per unit, but the important thing is that as an investor, you can get a pretty decent idea of the REIT's expected yield before investing into one. In fact, while researching for this video, our team found a news article written in May of this year that lists the gross distribution yield of India's 3 listed REITs between 5.9% to 8.5%. Now notice I've been using the word gross distribution yield, and that's because what we have seen here so far is the pre-tax yield. There can be quite a difference between the pre-tax and post-tax yield. So let's attend to some of the taxation rules surrounding REITs in the coming section. So there are 4 ways in which investors make returns from REITs. There is interest, there is dividend, there is return of capital, or as the term went, amortization of SPV debt, and finally there are capital gains. The taxation rules for each of these 4 components is different and can have a big implication on your post-tax returns. Let's start with the interest part, and very simply, all interest income is taxable. So if you're an investor in the Embassy Office Parks REIT, then for Q4, the gross interest is 1.24 rupees. And if you're in the 30% income tax slab, then net of taxes, your returns come to 87 paisa from the interest component. The next component is dividend income, and the taxation on this depends on whether the REIT SPV had opted for a lower tax regime or not. This is similar to what we saw with InvITs, and it means that if the SPV had opted for tax concessions from the government, then the dividends are taxable for the investors. However, if the SPV had not taken the tax concessions, then dividend incomes are tax-free for the investors. This also means that the tax treatment of dividends will differ from one REIT to the other. But just to close the loop with regards to the Embassy Office Parks REIT, until the last available data, their SPV had not opted for any tax concessions, and hence all dividends are exempt from taxes in the hands of unit holders. The third component is the amortization of SPV level debt, which is entirely non-taxable, so no tax worries there. Now, if you put all of this together, very specific to the Embassy Office Parks REIT, out of the total of 5.6 rupees per unit in Q4, the interest part, that is 1.24 rupees, is taxable, while the rest, the dividend and the amortization part, is not taxable. The fourth and the final component to understand from a taxation perspective is capital gains. Now, if you have units in a REIT like the ones from Embassy, Mindspace or Brookfield, then your short-term and long-term capital gains are treated exactly like any other equity instrument. That is, profits earned on holdings less than 1 year are short-term capital gains and they are taxed at 15%, and profits on beyond 1 year holdings are long-term and are taxed at 10% in excess of 1 lakh rupees. However, instead of holding units in a REIT, if you have units in an international REIT fund of funds, then different taxation rules apply. In this case, if the holding period is less than 3 years, then it will be deemed as short-term capital gains and will be taxed as per the investor's income tax slab. And if the holdings are beyond 3 years, then it's long-term and is taxed at 20% with indexation benefits. REITs offer many advantages, including regular income generation, a relatively low investing threshold of 50,000 rupees, professional management, capital gains, and most importantly, it allows investors the opportunity to diversify one's investment portfolio. With systematic investments in real estate using REITs, one can look at improving one's asset allocation, which is a wonderful way of reducing portfolio risk while keeping the returns intact. Now, REITs do come with some limitations. For one, the number of REITs in India is limited, and as it stands, there are only 3 publicly listed REITs and 1 mutual fund which offers an international fund of funds scheme. And yes, while there is some news floating around that leading names like DLF and Godrej are primed to introduce their own REITs, there is still no confirmation of that yet. The other thing to look out for is the taxability element on interest earned and in some cases even the dividend portion. For investors in the 30% slab, this can have a large bearing on the post-tax returns. And finally, one should not forget that the underlying asset in REITs are commercial properties which are not insulated from economic calamities like recessions and lockdowns. So if the economy goes south, it is likely to take away the REIT's ability to make rent. Another point we'd like to mention here is that by virtue of its construct, REITs should not be equated with equities, and hence it is not likely to give equity type returns. In our opinion, REITs do look promising, and if not now, then definitely in the future as the sector matures from the recent baby steps it has taken. One can certainly start small, and the exposure to REITs can be kept at a min-max of 5 to 10% of your portfolio. And with this, we come to the end of this video.